This is a Momentum Media production.
Investing insights with Right Property Group, exploring trends in real estate and helping property investors gain financial security.
Well, g'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host, Investing Insights with Right Property Group, and as our great guitar riff there, I don't know, we need to update this. I don't know, I quite like the music, it gets me into the mood. And for those of you who don't know, and you would have just heard that intro, actually play it before we actually get talking on this podcast, because a number of different reasons. It reminds us what we're doing, but also gets us in to the rhythm of property investment. And much like a good guitar riff, Steve Waters, who's shaking his head, co-host, and Victor Kumar, property investment goes up and down and left and right. And you've got to string the chords together to get the right tempo, the right beat, the right music to give enjoyment to the masses, mate. So
you're good. I don't know where you were going. I didn't know where you were going with that, but that was good. But,
mate, the melody of property investment is sometimes property investment is thrash metal. Sometimes it's the Pachelbel canon and classical music. Sometimes it's a pleasure to listen to, and sometimes it's a headache of the death metal that you probably play on a Saturday night with your homemade drum kit in your garage, Steve, belting out the tunes. That's probably investment to me.
Yeah. So when you look at it, Phil, especially when you're hosting, what you're trying to say is that this podcast is absolutely strung together.
It's absolutely strung together.
I would have thought it was a pitch perfect harmonic balance, Victor.
God. Yeah, there you go. Well,
anyway, thanks for listening.
It's glued together. With a lot of band-aids just to hold, at least to hold the three of us together. And how this has stood the test of time, I don't know. We've been doing this now for 5 years. I think we're into our 5th season, Victor, and for some reason we're still able to talk to each other and find at least some commonality of enjoyment. I guess that is property investment. If it wasn't for property investment, I absolutely wouldn't be friends with you guys. It's pretty clear and simple.
Yeah, the only reason I'm friends with you, Phil, is that you get the free coffees. So
this is right. Well, I haven't seen you for so long, Victor. Thought we're going to be in the studio today, but we're still using the Zoom. But it's a great enabler. It's getting it done. But back to the point, if this property market was one of the great songs of the last, it's a question for both of you, of the last 50 years. Let's get back to the disco era. And what would it be, considering the hysteria that's encapsulating property investors at the moment? Vic?
Well, it'll be a classic that never dies, right? It is evergreen and stands the test of time. And really, whether you're a new generation or an older generation, you'll still relate to the song.
So what's the song?
Don't know. It depends on your tune and depends on your mood.
Something that is irrelevant 50 years ago is just as relevant today.
Just as relevant.
I'm just trying to think what songs my kids listen to. And I listen to this. Here we go. This is my song. I've just worked it out. I used to listen to this song when I was in primary school. My kids are in primary school now. It's "We Built This City" by Starship. There you go.
That's actually pretty good.
You like that, Steve?
That was actually that's very good. And I'd love if we had a forum for the podcast or something along those lines where people could respond and say, what song corresponds to investing or their journey or whatever it may be.
Send us an email on questions@rightpropertygroup.com.au and tell us what your investing song is.
Yeah, we built this city on Chico rails.
built this. Well, if you listen to some, it'd be built this city on cheap debt, cheap money. But nonetheless,
well, we're still building this city. Well, we're in Sydney, still getting built here. They're talking about the 6 cities thing now in New South Wales. The state budget's underway. Treasurer Keane is getting that all sorted out.
Well, big news there too.
Spending money all over the joint.
Yeah, big news on the budget. At the time of recording, with the first homeowners stamp duty brackets first homeowners, the trigger has been pulled on that. We've talked about this for probably 18 months now, maybe a bit longer. I think they're going to trial it with the first homeowners to begin with. Obviously, the details are a bit light because it's yet to be properly announced. But wow, second biggest barrier to entry for first homeowners now gone on a payment plan, mind you. But the initial
buy now, pay later for property.
Well, Zip Pay
for property.
Proudly sponsored by. It probably shouldn't say that because they're all capitulating the buy now, pay later.
They'll tell you it's not credit, Steve. That's the reason why. It's not credit. So it shouldn't be regulated like credit cards.
No.
Yeah.
But look, it's a big moment, I guess, in time. There are going to be lots of people that just say, wow, well, here's my chance to get in. Whether it be coupled with other grants is yet to be seen. Its price the ceiling price is 1.5 million, and that's huge. That opens up vast areas of
most properties
well, it's the average, isn't it?
Yeah.
It statistically speaking, there are those that are against it and there are those that are for it. And I think that probably comes down to an individual appetite. From a business model, from New South Wales state government, I actually think it's not a bad move. You'll go backwards to go forwards. But in perpetuity, wow.
But this is the issue, though, and I've been sort of trying to form my own opinion on it all, guys, and I sort of, it lends itself to this debate, and a lot of people coming out now saying, this isn't going to help affordability. What's going on in the market right now, and prices coming back, and this hyperinflation, all these sort of things, isn't going to change the affordability equation, and sort of removing that as a requirement of the initial purchase price to get into property of not having to pay stamp duty. Yeah, it means that people are going to get in the property sooner. That means you're going to have more people probably with a bigger deposit because they don't have to allocate that bit to stamp duty. So what's that going to do to prices in those areas where first-time buyers are going to be operating? I don't know, Vic.
Well, just on that, sorry, Victor, steal your thunder. I'll speak before you. I think if you had have gone back 6 months ago, 12 months ago with the first homeowner stamp duty scenario, I'd probably agree with you. That savings would have been included into the price very quickly, as the market would have just perpetuated even in a more stronger fashion. Today, however, because of the higher rates, because of the burden on borrowing, so the higher the rates, the less the serviceability there is, I don't see it perpetuating the market. I think you could probably argue that it'll help, being one of probably 3 or 4 other components to put a floor in the market. Now, that's taking into account or having an assumption that rates don't sort of escalate out of control, and some would argue that it may, but it's just another piece to the jigsaw which will help. You take that component with the stamp duty in combination with the lack of accommodation, which we've been banging on about for 5 years now, the timing of it probably couldn't be better.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, Steve, any government incentive, any change in how you're able to buy a property or what assistance you get generally gets taken up by the market really quickly in terms of price increases or availability of properties. And I guess the balancing point over here is the rising interest rates, which perhaps may automatically push people down in terms of the level of affordability as to whether they can go to the 1.5 mil or lower. And certainly with the way rates are moving and the way Reserve Bank is sounding the message to say that brace for more interest rate rises, it will take a slow and steady approach of people getting into the market. It's not going to be like last year where if we got this sort of incentive that people will jump in left, right, and center. I think people will take a measured approach and jump into the market when they think they are truly ready and when they know that they can actually afford the repayments. Because just because there is an incentive, and apart from the stamp duty, in New South Wales, you've also got the incentive of, you say, the medicos, the teachers, where there's going to be a shared equity scheme with the government, where the state government will give up to 40% assistance to these professionals. When you have that in combination, there's certainly moving in the right direction in terms of getting people into property ownership. However, what are the flow-on effects? Especially when you look at generally, people tend to own their properties for perhaps 5 years if they're not getting into a planned approach. Will there be a big turnover in 5 years' time when people really decide that, now this isn't the right asset for me, I want to move on to the next one and sell down?
Yeah, potentially. I think in relation back to the stamp duty scenario, though, I believe, and once again, the devil's in the detail, which we don't have yet, that it's attached to the property, not the person.
Yep.
So therefore, it's there forever. But also, if we sort of think a little left of field here, is the state government saying to themselves, well, yes, we are going to go backward in terms of revenue before we can go forwards and accumulate the book, the residual income, if you will. Are they preparing themselves for the mass immigration that is needed? And if I play that out, and all governments have said we need immigration like we've never seen it before, as I've said many a time, they ultimately become purchasers. So initially they'll be renters, and the majority will probably go to Sydney and Melbourne in terms of international migration into Melbourne and Sydney. And so Sydney state government saying, well, we're going to get a big portion of this immigration. Eventually a lot of them are going to become buyers. We've got a rental crisis or an accommodation crisis. The timing is probably never better to implement that strategy. The $22 trillion question is, will other states follow suit?
And that's the big thing, Steve. And you're already seeing it play out now. A lot of people saying New South Wales trying to get the jump on other states as an attraction vehicle, try and stem some of the leakage of people up to the north to Brizzy. If they can make it cheaper to buy a home in New South Wales, hopefully they can keep it. I know quite a lot of people pretty senior in the New South Wales government. They've got some pretty bold plans about making New South Wales, Sydney an attraction destination, to retain, but also attract people into it. And fortunately, this is often where most people land when they arrive in Australia, if they choose to call Australia home, which is good for Sydney. So they're saying that New South Wales is getting the jump on other states, and other states will have to follow suit pretty quickly. I note also, I don't know if you guys have seen it, how, the competition for rental properties up in Queensland is so strong that the Lord Mayor is trying to hike the rates for people who have Airbnb properties, try and get more rental properties on the market. So this is an issue. But my overall, and this is a podcast for property investors, from those who are starting out to those who have significant portfolio. We're talking about housing affordability for first home buyers or for new Australians. Like, okay, what does it mean for property investors? Well, this stimulus says to me that the government is shuffling its deck and property is at the top of its deck in terms of investment. The government at state and federal levels now has or will have considerable skin in the game to make sure that property values continue to go up, or at least hold firm. And that's the catch-all for me. So as a property investor, I go, well, if the government's backing it, they're going to want to try and make sure it doesn't, as an asset class, dilute its value like Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although it's funny that you mentioned that, because like Bitcoin, which to me is a speculative asset, there's no value to it other than what someone is willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Are there, and I'm not bagging it, I've just got really no opinion because I don't understand it enough, but it's a speculative asset class. Has there been a large portion of property purchases that had the same approach, that being speculative, over the last 2 years? Because of that whole FOMO scenario, cheap credit, got to get in, because we can see on the social profiles everyone's becoming a gazillionaire within a short amount of time. My fear is that some people went into property without any foresight, saying, well, if this happens, if that happens, and we get back to a normal market, will I be in a position to hold firm? Or is it because I'm a speculator, I'm only here for a quick buck and I'm in and out?
Yeah. And Steve, that's a really good point, and it lends itself to really the thrust of how I want to shape the remainder of this chat here, is that you look at the hysteria that's happening inside of the crypto coins at the moment. You see Bitcoin's under 20 grand, $20,000. Like, it's down a lot. There's a lot of hysteria in that market, but I would say there's a lot of hysteria inside of property markets, and maybe some of it led by people who were playing that speculative game. They're not haven't been traditionally a real estate investor, and those last couple of years they've gone, all right, well, I'll put some money into property because it seems to be rocketing along in value. Those people who just follow fads, let's be clear, property was a bit of a fad for the last couple of years, and for the FOMO investors. So, the key things now is, if you are a property investor,
a property imposter.
And property imposter was what I was actually trying to say. I think a lot of people have been property imposters. So I would say that their portfolios now are pretty fragile, whereas the property investor, the real property investors, want to be building agile portfolios, and that is how you can shape or buttress your approach against hysteria that's taking on right now. I'm not hysteric about property. I'm going, happy days ahead because I've got an agile portfolio that's been built well, a lot of it through you guys. So how do you know whether you've got a fragile portfolio or an agile portfolio? That's the big question.
It is. And I think that the easy answer to that is somewhat, can you sleep at night with the current changes? And if you drill down further, will it be really, the question is it about the asset value if you're in an area that is contracted over the last 6 to 8 weeks? Is that a concern to you, or is it the cash flow? And I bet that in most cases, if not over 90%, that it'll be around the cash flow position. Now, let me be clear though, cash flow is in the eye of the beholder. Everyone has that different and unique set of circumstances, but ultimately it'll come down to, is this now going to affect my lifestyle? Will I be living on Jats crackers and Chico rolls because I can't afford to pay the mortgage, in combination, to be fair, with the rising cost of living, of goods and services across the world? So if the cash flow position is there and you're still well within your buffers, as we often refer to, then you should be able to sleep well. If, however, you've had a speculative approach where you haven't balanced the numbers or balanced your portfolio and you've been tilting towards all growth and not even being concerned with the cash flow position, then potentially you might be in a little bit of trouble. And as I say that, I go back to when I first started, and Vic and I started in and around the same time. Maybe, Vic, you had a year on me, I think, because you're 5 years older. And I fell trapped to that myself. I remember when I first started, it was, and I'll preface it by saying there was no one like us around, or there wasn't this part of the industry as it exists today. It was, take an American book and try and Australianize it to our system and then suck it and see. Have a go and see how it goes. Because there was nothing around in terms of education unless you wanted to be ripped via some of those headline acts from back then. And I fell trapped to the growth is my equity position. My equity position is my wealth position. Money was relatively cheap at the time compared to, I think I was paying around about 7 or 9% way back. Yeah. Back then that was cheap. But it was free flowing. The credit was free flowing. It was the beginning of the low doc loan. So how much do you want? I'll have that, sign here, press hard. Third copy is yours. Here's your money. There was no real verification. And that was the system back then. And so I just chased growth, and I had phenomenal growth. But I quickly realized that the cash flow position was like the oxygen I needed to sustain the debt and sustain the lifestyle should things turn around. And from that moment on, and we're going back to 2001, but I realized that the cash flow was once again like that oxygen, and I quickly pivoted before I needed it. My fear for today is that people have fallen into that same trap. Now, because Vic and I went through that same thing and we learnt those lessons way back, that's the strategies that we deploy today, is say, look, you know what? Growth is very, very important. That is our wealth, but so too is the cash flow within your own requirements. So you continually need to be adjusting for the what ifs that always happen. So let me say that again. The what ifs always eventuate. And potentially here we are again now. So those that were chasing nothing other than growth and not concerned with the cash flow, there'll be a portion of those that'll be caught with their pants down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree, Steve, that we both made that mistake in the beginning where automatically we are gravitating towards how much growth can we get? How much growth can we get out of the portfolio? How much growth can we get out of this property? And back those days, these data were at the back of a magazine, which was already outdated by the time we got to it. And the reality is that this is where, when you're looking at it from a property investment point of view, there are two facets to this. One is your wealth, your long-term wealth, which is your growth, your equity position, and basically your asset value. The other aspect of it is your lifestyle, and the lifestyle is equated to the cash flow situation. So I'm not talking about positive cash flow. I'm talking about how much cash flow does the portfolio take from you on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, before tax, so that you know that if you've earned your money, PAYG as an example, you need to allocate this much of your cash flow and therefore this much of your lifestyle money towards holding your assets, which is part of your long-term wealth. And as soon as you've got those two things cemented in your mind, you can't go wrong, regardless of what the property market faces, what the interest rates are, what the new fad is in the property investing arena. You will always be bedded down and have strong foundational approach towards property investing, and therefore you'll keep yourself safe from the general and known fluctuations that come as part and parcel of property investing.
That's a good point, the known fluctuations. And I think that's another trap as well for a lot of people, is they think that property grows in a linear fashion, and it just doesn't. And we keep talking about that. The trajectory is up over time, but you do have those fluctuations. And it's during those moments of flux that if you aren't prepared to either exploit opportunity or survive, then you'll become a statistic. And that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. And we see it time and time and time again. Phil, the other day when we were on a Facebook Live that we hold on every second Thursday, and you happened to jump on.
Yeah, did you like that? Dropped in.
There
slid into your direct message.
The gate crasher.
Yeah, the wedding crasher. It's but you mentioned something that was really important, I guess, is because when you first got started, we were at the end of a GFC, and the tail end of a GFC was where there was still negative consumer sentiment throughout the entire economy across the world. But you managed to, bring yourself together way back, because let's face it, that was the beginnings of everything. Yeah. And you jumped into a market, with education and so on and so forth. But you didn't wait for the market to be halfway up the face of the wave. You saw the opportunity and you acted accordingly. But you were prepared as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a mindset thing. And, I don't want us to be the merchants of doom and gloom, saying there's going to be casualties in this market. And also, there's casualties in every market, even good markets, there's casualties. You make the wrong decisions. This is about whether or not your portfolio is agile or fragile. And I think most people who probably tune into this podcast have probably got agile portfolios because they're investing in their education. It's pretty easy to get property right. It's pretty easy to get it wrong. And what I find is the people who get property investment wrong, are not those who are investing in their education. They're not getting good situation awareness. They're not getting strategic ideas and planning. They're not being tactically smart. That's the reason why I use the buyer's agent, right? But, mindset is fundamental to all investment decisions. And going to the point that you made, Steve, I was happy to get in the property because I'd done my homework and I'd got the right people to help me out going down that pathway: buyer's agent, mortgage broker, accountant at house. So, you need to have a good relationship with change. And a lot of people fear change. A lot of people hate change. A lot of people are scared of change. A lot of people try and duck and dive change. But you said, Steve, that you started in 2000. You think about the known what ifs, and there's this whole thing around known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns, right?
Garden gnomes.
Garden gnomes, whatever it is. So, what you're guaranteed in property is change. And there's a lot of things that are out of control, a lot of things inside your control. So it comes down to mindset. So I was happy to enter the market at that point in time, Vic. But when you look at how things are changing and this awareness of or acceptance of change in this market, it's probably a big step for most people to go through that step because you can't change it. But then, Victor, what do you do about shaping your mindset now around change so you can either leverage an agile portfolio to capitalize on it, or if you're new to this market and you're probably thinking, whoa, I wanted to get in a property when it was booming, but it doesn't seem to be booming anymore, might not be the right asset class for me, I'd probably say that this is probably the right time to get going.
Yeah, absolutely. So, successful investing is usually counter-cyclical, right? So when there's a boom market happening, which, 2020, 21, it was the property type that we are focusing on in terms of grabbing the right location, the right type of property in line with your needs, your financial footprint. Now that the market is changing, the strategy does not change. However, the opportunity type may change in the sense that we may be looking for a different type of opportunity in the same areas, in the same property type in itself. So this is where there is fine-tuning of what you're buying in terms of the asset, but you still have a very strong hard, fixated approach towards where you're heading for the entire portfolio, where you're heading for this new addition to the portfolio, and what's the general plan. You don't want to deviate away from what your end goal is, despite changes happening in the market. Otherwise, what you'll find is that you're actually not getting to what you set out to achieve, because you're not adjusting towards what the market is doing. You're adjusting more towards market sentiment or your own sentiment in itself. And therefore, you run around in circles and you never achieve what good fundamental approach investors would achieve over a longer period of time.
It's a good point, Vic. You said something in there, which I learned early on from someone who helped shape my thoughts around investing, and that is the market is between your ears.
Yeah.
Always has been, always will be. And it's as simple as that. Something else to add, though, too, is I think now's a really good time for people to watch their expenditure in terms of serviceability, because clearly with the higher interest rates, that erodes our serviceability, but so too does all that other unproductive debt. So there's a real chance that portions of the economy will tilt back towards credit card debt as things get tighter. And as we all know, that erodes serviceability like nothing else, or personal debt does. But here's where the potential opportunity is. Unfortunately, that'll be at the whim of others somewhere in the future. All the new cars that people have bought over the last 2 years, 18 months, 1 year, whatever it is, with a 1 year wait, and they still haven't got them. What happens over the next 6 to 12 months when the cars land in Australia ready to be settled, so to speak? Do they get the loans? Can they get the loans? If they do, the serviceability is eroded, or do we see thousands and tens of thousands of new cars sitting on the lot that weren't taken up?
There's a good analog with that with often planned properties, right?
That's right. In my head, I was thinking that as I said.
There's a lot of people who have signed up for properties that probably settle, well, the finished construction over the next, if they can do, and if the builder survives, over the next sort of 6 to 12 months, and they're going to have a pretty rude shock if they paid the retail price in mid 2021, and when it actually comes to settlement, it's cheaper, and you can't get the debt. That's a double whammy.
Correct. And we talked about opportunities in the market during the Facebook Live and our last podcast. So if you want to just go back to our last podcast, and we speak about where we think 3 to 4 areas.
You guys crystallised that really well. I enjoyed that back end of the Facebook Live. I think you spoke about 4 different opportunities. Not to give too much away, so go and tune into it. But buying 99% finished stuff when people have gone, there's some really good, there's some gold in that. Go and listen to it.
And you know what? That's just it's a product of history repeating itself. It's been there, done that. We saw this happen. We were able to sort of execute those types of opportunities back in the GFC. Not that I think we're in that, but nonetheless, let's go back and have a listen. I was speaking to a builder yesterday, and he has a mate who's a very good builder, high-end builder. That builder is so concerned about being able to fulfill contracts. He's gone back to a few of his clients, which haven't started the build yet, and said, I will give you $200,000 in this case to walk away from the contract. So the builder is willing to pay the consumer $200,000 to.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Let's rip the contract up. He's prepared to.
The damages on the contract, it's like a submarine deal. I think we just paid the French about $800 million or something or other.
Yeah, nice.
And when per the contract, we didn't actually need to pay them that much, but we just wanted to smooth things with our friends in France. So anyway,
French friends. Yeah, so you're willing to tear up $200,000 because that's a cheaper alternative for you than actually doing the build. As the builder,
most of them are losing money on these fixed price contracts now. They're going, they're all in the world. I reckon there's negative equity with most builders now, and most of them, and then sort of soon to be insolvent. Like, it's a big deal. But back to the point around off-plan purchase or cars, Steve. I reckon there's a lot of people sort of sweating it right now, and they might hold their value, but can you actually get the money that you subscribed into when you first
when you first signed on? And that goes back to the point: before you buy the property, you need to be able to buy the debt, and to buy the debt, you need to cross the T's, dot the I's, and look after your not just your credit rating, but clearly the household budget, because that's what the banks are looking at. And this is where the crossroads are at this point in time with escalating costs of living. You really need to think about that.
Yeah. Well, you look at these interest rates, Vic, they reckon it should peak out at sort of 2.5%, right? Which probably means you're paying 5 to 6%
5.5
mortgages. Yeah. And the bank's got to put another 3% on top of that for the buffer, right? So you're going to get serviced at 8.5% interest rates. That really dilutes the buying power.
It certainly does. Yeah, it certainly does. One of the things that we tend to have very short memories, right? So even if you look back a couple of years back, we were doing cartwheels when we were getting fixed rates at 4.99 because the variable rates were at 6.99 at that point in time. And we're not talking too long ago. We're talking about 4 or 5 years ago in that sense. So what we need to keep in mind is that this low cash rate that we're coming off at the moment was part of an emergency measure to keep the economy ticking along as the pandemic gripped the world. And so you had all of the major economies drop their cash rates to keep things ticking along. And now we need to push it back to normalcy. So that where normal lies around 2.5-3%, and inflation needs to sit around 2 to 3% for everything to be in harmony. And this is where, when we are assessing properties and when we send properties to our clients, we are doing the assessments at 4% interest rate at a very minimum, even though you could arguably last year get rates at 1.99. We're still doing it at 4% because you need to be looking at it from a viewpoint of that's what the normal rates are. If you look at your average 10-year rate, from 2022 back 10 years, it is 3.88, right? But in that 3.88, there was 7%, there was 1.99%. So it fluctuates all along. So if you did your sums on the average rate and did not take sovereign incentives such as negative gearing into account, you can test, weather the test of time and hold on to your property because you've done your sums up front. It's all about doing the worst case scenario up front and then aiming for the best case scenario.
And that's how you actually create an agile portfolio, Victor.
That's it.
It's not hard.
And that's the key.
It's difficult.
That's the secret. It's not that hard.
It's not that hard, but it's difficult to get right.
Well, it is. And it's difficult because it's a mindset thing, as you mentioned earlier on, but also the team of which is vast and varied. But I think ultimately, is it a good time? Yeah, for some it will be. For some it won't be. It's as simple as that. Is it the end of the world? I don't believe so. It's above my pay grade, but I don't believe so. There's too much at stake. And at the end of the day, if we look forward to carry on, then that should give us some peace, I guess. As long as we just address those real basic components, the cornerstones of life in terms of serviceability, investing, no matter what the asset class is, well, then you should be okay. But there's a big process.
But Steve, you shouldn't be going, oh, should I be okay? I think once you work out, am I going to be okay or not? You go, I'm going to be okay. What am I going to do about it? How do I be proactive? How do I champion that sort of positive and proactive mindset? And no doubt that's the sort of people calling you guys up right now going, yeah, I've had a look at it. I'm going to be all right. I got a stable job. I want to get stuck in.
Well, there's a key point, stable job.
Yeah.
And, like that's a big part of the confidence piece. And, as we all know, unemployment is at extremely low rates, lowest in many decades. So that element is strong. I think it's just more, once again, around, well, actually, maybe if I rephrase it, if there wasn't the escalating cost of living, let's just say we took inflation away, but rates were still going up, would there be a different narrative through the media? Or is it actually a combination of both? So people are more worried about their mortgages, or are they worried about the combination of mortgages and escalating costs of living? Now, it may sound like I'm being negative. I'm actually far from it. This is for those that I believe are sophisticated investors. They'd be just sitting back and going, well, you know what? Now's the time. If I go back to the GFC, Vic, you'll remember this. We were super busy, super busy, where, in its true term, the sophisticated investor came out to play, excluding Phil. It
Semi-sophisticated.
semi.
I do note also, you guys gave me a bit of a hard time when I jumped on your Facebook Live. I thought that was it wasn't very kind. It hurt my feelings.
Do you know why? Because you give us a hard time on this podcast because you've got a microphone in front of you, but there you had none. You could only type.
It's the only way. And I couldn't type fast enough is what my brain was thinking.
Yeah.
But I remember the point I made though, Steve, and maybe we conclude with this chat. I think I said, I reckon property's already come back 10%. The numbers haven't shown it yet in Sydney and in Melbourne. So everyone's talking about this sort of doomsday scenario. Guess what? We're already in this cycle right now of softer prices. So if you're sitting around waiting for that numbers to be reflected, go and speak to any auctioneer or real estate agent. They'll tell you. You guys are on the front line seeing it all the time, right? So
but not across the whole country.
Not across the whole country. Brizzy's different. No. Absolutely.
Adelaide's different. Perth's different. Yeah,
but
they're all
if you've
different.
been sitting around, and I'd probably fall into this bucket, and I need to chat to you guys about it, is if you've been sitting around waiting to get into the city market, this might be your time.
Yeah.
This might be your time.
Yeah.
So it's okay to buy on the way down. You want to try and get to the close to the bottom as possible, but Sydney prices are already down 10%. In some markets, they reckon that middle market's still holding ground. Like, what do you do? How do you pull the trigger, Steve? When do you know?
I think anyone who can pick the absolute bottom or top of a market, it's more good luck than good management. You can get somewhere within a couple of percent of either way. I think Sydney, there is some extreme value starting to appear throughout sectors of Sydney. Not all areas of Sydney, just some, especially towards the top end, I believe, and the bottom end, and especially now with the proposed stamp duty scenario and sort of underpinning the value proposition for that affordable corridor, definitely, as well as the top end, but for other reasons. But I want to go back to what I said a minute ago, not across all of Australia, because as always, people tend to generalize residential real estate as one market in the media, because otherwise it would take up 15 pages to dissect it. So I guess they just give it that general brush, so to speak. And when you had an escalating market, there wasn't a square inch or very few square inches of Australia over the last couple of years that didn't head north in terms of its value. But now we're getting back to normality. There is thousands of suburbs of which in some way, shape or form, they will perform individually. In other words, there will be some that concede value. There will be some that continue to go up. There'll be some that track sideways and every other derivative thereof. So now is the time to start isolating sectors of the market to bring out the truth to the forefront rather than just buy into what the media is saying in a very generalized fashion once again. And it'll be those that don't educate themselves that fall into that trap.
I agree. And when you're buying real estate, one of the approach, a safe approach, is to assume that it's going to go south the minute you bought it, and you're not able to refinance or sell it for and get your money back for the first 18 months. Not only that, you've also got a high transactional cost. Your stamp duties, your solicitor's fees, and your deposit stuck within the property. So this is where you really need to be looking at it more from a cash flow point of view. Now, I'm not talking about positive cash flow. I'm talking about affordability over here. So if you lost your job, can you afford to hold on to the portfolio? What can you do? Have you got your buffers set aside? Have you, regardless of what rates you are on at the moment, have you liquidated or liquefied some of your equity to help you tear over your rainy days, so that you're not always looking over your shoulders to say, okay, is there Mack truck coming as far as my portfolio is concerned? So these are your fundamentals that you should never sway away from, regardless of where the market is. It's all about the ability to hold onto your portfolio in the worst case scenario. And what measures have you put within the portfolio to perhaps boost your cash flow? What measures have you got in the portfolio in terms of diversification, so that if you did actually need to trade out of it, you trade out of a property that's in a more liquid market as opposed to a market that's starting to stagnate, or there's less players in the market, or values dropping in this market. So they're your fundamentals of property investing. And when investors come to us and they say, where should I be buying? That's the question they ask. It's the wrong question. What they should be asking is, what should I be buying, not where I should be buying. And the minute you are able to discern between the two of it and ask the right question, you are able to then set up your portfolio in a manner that then stands the test of time, regardless of whether interest rates are going up, regardless of whether the values are coming down. You still be able to hold on to your portfolio over the long term.
Yeah. And maybe even before that, the question is, what can I afford?
Yep.
Because that'll dictate the what, then the where, in that order.
There's a lot in that. What are people going to do, Vic, if they want to chat to you guys to explore a lot of those points? What's the best way?
So they can go onto our website, rightpropertygroup.com.au, and there's a contact us form. So once they reach out to us, we will then set up a time. So first of all, they'll speak with Melissa, who's a seasoned property investor, and she has many properties in a portfolio and seen that also the test of time. She will make sure that you are ready with information, with basics, before we set up a time to have a chat with either myself or Steve. And then here's a reality, right? When you do talk to us, about 20% of potential clients that do talk with us, we are outright saying that you should not be making a move right now. Right, we actually look at your financial fingerprint, what you've got going for you, and the threats that are coming your way, and the opportunities that are coming your way, and then we formulate a portfolio based on our years of experience, having many years of many property cycles, and then we make the call to say whether you should or you shouldn't.
Sounds pretty good. Rightpropertygroup.com.au, Facebook, Right Property.
Yep, all the Facebook, all the socials, Insta, all that sort of business. And just before we sign off, once again, just going back to what we said earlier on about the other podcast, do yourselves a favor, go back and listen to the last podcast or the Facebook Live, where we do talk about those potential opportunities for some.
Yeah, they're good. A really good way to frame strategically how you'll shape this market. That's Steve Waters and Victor Kumar, directors at Right Property Group. This is Investing Insights at Right Property Group. Any questions? Questions at rightpropertygroup.com.au. Any comments, any views, observations, anything like that? We're really keen to hear it, and we'll do a Q&A episode at some point soon, Vic. I know you get a lot of questions there. That's probably worthwhile answering them on air, because this is a period of flux for property. And you guys have been at this for 20 plus years. I've been at it for 10 plus years. Expect change, accept change, capitalize on change, because that's what the best investors are doing. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature, does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a